Hey everybody, welcome to the SimHanger. My name is Mark. Now, there's been a massive increase in the interest in flight simulation, particularly about 4 years ago with the release of Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 and of course the upcoming Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024. Now, with a lot of people jumping into flight sim, you may not be sure or confident in terms of what sort of peripherals you want to buy, what sort of setup that you want to aim to get to, or where in fact you should start. And that's really the whole focus of this video, is having a look at various options, and I'll be showing you exactly what I use. That's not to say that that's perfect for you, but it'll give you some indication and some idea of perhaps what's going to suit your budget and your style and how frequently or otherwise you're going to use flight simulation. We're going to have a look at a setup on a desktop. We're going to have a look at a setup on a fixed flight sim rig, and also we'll finish off having a look at a very similar setup but on a motion platform, which for me is absolutely the ultimate. The one thing we won't cover today is actually cockpit building, where we build a cockpit specific to a certain type of aircraft. I don't have experience in that regard, so I won't be covering that. Now, as I go through all the different bits and pieces of equipment, you're going to say, well, where do I find out that information? Well, what I'm going to do now is show you, because I've reviewed most, perhaps not all, but most of the equipment that I'll be showing. And I'll have video reviews on that. But putting all the links to those videos is a massive exercise. So what I'm going to do is we're just going to cut to my YouTube channel page and I'll show you how to search. We're now on the SimHanger Flight Simulation homepage on YouTube, and you'll see here there's a search option. However, what I recommend, and make it a little bit more focused, is click on the Videos tab here. This will take you just to my videos, and then using the search tab here, you could type in, if you're looking for something in particular, let's say rudder pedals, for example. And here we can see there's my review of the Velocity 1 rudder pedals, T-Flight, the TPRs from Thrustmaster, Charlie rudder pedals, Virpil, and so on. The further down, the less focused it can become. Or let's say, for example, we wanted to search for a particular make, let's say Turtle Beach. And now we get Turtle Beach. Everything related to Turtle Beach then comes up. So we've got the flight stick, we've got the flight deck, there's config guides here, the rudder pedals again, there's stand. And as we go down, all the various stuff related to them, so there's configuration guides and so on. And that's really searching for a review or a particular product. If I've covered it, as I say, I may not have covered all of them, is as simple as that. Today we're at Shuttleworth. Shuttleworth is one of the largest private collections of World War I and World War II aircraft in the world. It's based at Old Warden Airfield in the UK, and what a marvelous setting it is. Trying to determine exactly what sort of peripheral and what sort of setup will suit you will depend to some degree on how many hours or how much time you're going to spend in flight simulation. But to kick off, let's jump onto the desktop, perhaps one of the most common flight simulation scenarios around, and let's see what sort of options are available, from a very basic, very inexpensive setup to suit most budgets, and we can escalate it up from there. So let's go and have a look. Regardless whether you're on Xbox or PC, you can control your aircraft and the sim via your keyboard or via a gamepad. You'll find this very functional, although there's a lot of different key combinations to remember, but not really immersive or realistic. One thing I do recommend, for monitors up to 32-inch, put them on an extension arm. This allows you to quickly and easily adjust the height and distance, so you can adjust it as necessary to suit you depending on what you're flying and what peripherals you're using. I also highly recommend a powered USB hub with individual on-off switches for each port. Becomes more and more important as you add more peripherals to ensure a steady connection. If you want to increase control but remain on a tight budget, then selecting a suitable joystick could well be the option. Select one with also a twist function to give you rudder control. This is the Turtle Beach flight stick, for example. It's fairly basic but very useful as it has two levers, one for throttle and the other one you could use, say, for flaps, as well as an array of buttons that you could configure to suit. Moving up in terms of functionality but not necessarily in cost would be to get a HOTAS, hands-on throttle and stick. This is Thrustmaster's HOTAS 1. PC and Xbox compatible, provides all the functionality of a joystick but with a separate throttle control. The unit itself can also split into two separate pieces, although they are joined by a single cable. For both PC and Xbox, you can also link the T-Flight rudder pedals to the HOTAS 1. These rudder pedals from Thrustmaster are once again in the budget range, functional but not a lot else. But if you're on a budget, well, they do the job and provide both rudder and brake axes. For PC only, they'll also function independently. Stepping up a level in terms of both price and functionality, and again subject to the sort of aircraft that you're flying, you can look at the Honeycomb Alpha yoke. For Xbox users, make sure it's the XPC model, and the Alpha hub is also required for Xbox. The Honeycomb Alpha yoke is mid-priced with quite a lot of functionality, including various button switches, as well as magneto and starter switch. Maintaining our focus on the entry level, and again relatively inexpensively, you can add the Logitech Flight trim wheel and throttle quadrant. Once again, these are budget offerings that are very functional. In fact, the trim wheel is very good indeed. The throttle quadrant itself also features 6 buttons, which you can configure to suit within the sim. Of course, peripherals such as trim wheels and throttle quadrants are not restricted to use with the yoke. You can use it with a joystick. This joystick here is Thrustmaster's Warthog, a very good all-metal construction. Both price points and quality moving to another level, high degree of accuracy with Hall effect sensors, with the option for a desk side mount if required, at an additional cost. Of course, we can't forget those who want to fly the tube liners. The range of peripherals, throttle quadrants, etc. available continue to expand. And the one I use most often is Winwing's Airbus A320 FCU with left and right EFIS. Very competitively priced, and a fantastic addition to anybody who likes to fly the Airbuses. I look forward to their forthcoming release of the same for the Boeing. For those of you in general aviation and looking for a step up in terms of immersion and reality, well, there's FS Builders panels. In addition to their Steam Gauges panel, of which I'm a fan, they also offer competitively priced G1000 and GNS 430-530 units, amongst others. This is the Steam Gauges panel and the G1000 that we're looking at, being used with the SmartFly yoke. Whilst it doesn't have all the switches etc. of the Honeycomb Alpha yoke, for example, it's an all-metal construction and built to last. Well, in terms of options for desktops, we've just scratched the surface. But I hope this gives you some idea of the range and versatility of peripherals that are available to increase your immersion and realism, and suitable for flying on the monitor or in VR. For those of you wanting to take your flight simulation a little bit more seriously, you might consider a dedicated work area or workspace, and that normally involves getting a static rig. And there's a wide multitude of different static rigs that are suitable, all with adjuster plates. If you're wondering about this beauty here behind me, by the way, that's the very famous Spitfire Mark V C. When setting up a dedicated flight sim station, obviously space is a primary consideration, and in my experience you're going to need something in the region of about 2 meters by 1.5 meters. Now, I've been flight simming for more years than I care to remember, and of course I've built up this over years. The flight sim rig itself, of course it doesn't come with any of the peripherals. It's from Next Level Racing. I started off with the military edition, and I've subsequently upgraded to the Flight Seat and Flight Stand Pro. Slightly larger with more variants and options. Quality is outstanding, and whilst at first they may appear a little bit pricey, they are definitely value for money. Sturdily built, easy to assemble, and will last a lifetime. For anyone thinking of getting anything from Next Level Racing, there is a 5% discount code in the notes below, valid only in the USA unfortunately, as Next Level Racing often sell through retailers elsewhere. Due to the limitation of the number of monitors supported by most graphic cards, I changed from a 3-monitor setup to a single monitor setup. This is a 48-inch 4K monitor capable of 60, 120 and 138 Hz. The different refresh rates are important if you want to experience higher than 60 FPS. When not flying in VR, which I do quite frequently, I really enjoy flying on the very large monitor. I find it very immersive. You feel as if you're actually in the cockpit. As you can tell, I normally use this rig for GA flying, and my yoke is a force feedback device from flightsim.com. It's the CLS60. And force feedback, well, it's transforming flight simulation. For my throttle quadrant, I'm using the Honeycomb Bravo throttle quadrant, an exceptionally versatile piece of equipment for both GA and airliner flying. The switch panel that you see on the left-hand side is one of my favorites. It's from the company Desktop Pilot, highly recommended, includes master and battery switch avionics, as well as mags and start. The rudder pedals I use are from Whirlpool. It's their Ace rudder pedals with dampener, providing me with infinite control. I wouldn't be without them. I've configured my system so I can use either yoke or flight stick. My flight stick here is from Whirlpool. It's the Warbird base with the Constellation Alpha grip. It's the best non-force feedback joystick that I've ever used. I swap between flight stick and yoke using a USB powered hub. You'll also notice I'm using the GNS 530, which can also swap as a GNS 430, which is actually how I'm using it in the image. This has become an essential part of my day-to-day flying, and it's from Flight Sim Builder. In fact, I use it so often I can now use it in VR and dial in the switches just by muscle memory and feel. You simply pop out the panel in Sim and you're ready to go. You'll also notice that on the right-hand side I've got another monitor or screen. In this case it's showing me my route and location using Navigraph. Both the monitor and the stand, which fit to the Alpha and Bravo, is from a German-based company called Cockpit Crafters. I often use this secondary screen during streams, etc., so I can read comments and so on. You'll also notice on the lower left-hand side another mounting plate. When flying a Warbird or jet fighter, something like that, I then use the Turtle Beach flight deck throttle quadrant. I attach it here. I don't always have it connected to allow for ease of access into the sim pit itself, but simply attach it when I need to. Another essential element for me when flying on the monitor, of course, is my Tobii Eye Tracker 5, allowing me simply to move my head to look around the cockpit and at the surrounding landscape. Config guides on my channel, discount code in the notes below. As I fly both GA and airliners on this rig, of course, detail within and outside the cockpit is important, and when in VR, almost exclusively I use the Pimax Crystal Light. The beauty, of course, in having a setup such as this is it's just ready to go as and when you need it. Both mouse and keyboard are wireless. And then if you're really dedicated to flight sim and a true enthusiast in every sense of the word, then the next option from here is a motion platform. If you want to take that dedicated flight sim space but want to take it one step further in terms of realism and immersion, then a motion platform could be a consideration, and they're not as expensive as they once were. I, for example, use DOF Reality's H3. By the way, if you're wondering, that of course is the legendary Tiger Moth. The model H3 from DOF Reality has pitch, roll and yaw axes, and in essence reads the telemetry directly from Microsoft Flight Simulator via third-party software SimRacing Studio. I use this rig almost exclusively in VR. Add in that sense of immersion and realism that VR brings, and add in motion and tactile feedback, and, well, you have a whole different experience. This is one instance where I can really say it's a game changer. And then, being a flight sim nut as I am, I take it one step further and add in the HF8 haptic seat pad from Next Level Racing. This provides vibration feedback via 8 spinners in the seat, which are relatively small in size and therefore it doesn't really affect the comfort overall. Once again, it reads the telemetry coming from the sim, then top it all off with a force feedback flight stick from Moser. This is Moser's AB9 base with their MH16 flight stick. Once again, it reads the telemetry from the sim of excellent construction, built to last. Now I've got one, I'd never be without it. Also from Next Level Racing, I have their freestanding mouse and keyboard stand. It's a perfect partner to the DOF H3. Mounted on top of the Bravo throttle quadrant is the Octavi IFR controller. I use this in VR relying on muscle memory and use the dial to control the GNS or G1000. Simple, quick and easy to do. The stand that it's mounted on once again comes from Cockpit Crafters, and as this is a motion rig, well, it's a necessity. Once again with my setup I've got it to use with yoke or flight stick, and when using the flight stick I use it with the VPC Mongoose 50 CM3 throttle, and that of course is from Virpil. When not using the flight stick I use the Alpha yoke from Honeycomb and the Bravo throttle quadrant, which we've already covered. I have backed Virpil's new yoke with the Constellation handles, and I'm sure that will find a place on my DOF rig once it's available in May next year. Mounted on the DOF H3 for rudder pedals I have Thrustmaster's TPR or pendulum rudder pedals. Whilst I acknowledge they are expensive, they are excellent when mounted. To mount, I did have to drill a few extra holes. I have the controls for the haptic seat pad mounted here, and one question may be, how do I connect everything? Well, I use a 7-port USB powered hub. This connects all my peripherals and my motion compensation as well, which is through the WIT motion sensor. On the motion rig in VR, I fly almost exclusively with the Quest 3. Whilst perhaps not the best visuals, it represents great bang for your buck, and most importantly, I can use it wirelessly. Perfect for a motion rig. We've already seen a Spitfire as part of the backdrop. This is an equally magnificent backdrop. Of course, it's the Hawker Hurricane, and this model is the 1B. Well, I hope this video has given you some idea of the sort of things that are available and the sort of setups, and in some way either it's been of interest or it may be useful to you in the future. In any event, we're looking forward to Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 coming out soon. So until then, stay well, look after yourselves. I'll see you again soon, and ciao for now.